Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is titled, HOA gave me $30,000 fine for my grass being too tall. They tried to steal my property. TLDR. HOA hires friends to measure grass in order to fine people for more money. I leave for 2 months and come back to $30,000 worth of fines because my mower quit on me. They threaten for me to pay, or they will foreclose my house. I take it to court and destroy them by winning and getting to keep my house. The win sparks neighbors to start going against the HOA and them trying to fine people for the smallest things. If you mess with a guy after his mother dies, you are going to regret it in more ways than one. I swear the HOA in my neighborhood and all of their friends are absolutely crazy. If you think that statement is a little extreme, I want to introduce you to some of the key characters of this story. First of all, the HOA, who are more than well known for fining people and wanting everything to how they like it. Next is the group of people that I will refer to as the grass Gestapo. Now I have heard that in some areas the HOA uses the dues that they get to hire like a security patrol car or something along those lines. I want to make it clear that I have no objection to using HOA money to do something to benefit everyone else. What they did though was hire some of their friends using HOA funds and having them drive around for what they claim as safety, but is actually just trying to catch people in violation of the HOA rules. The thing is though, I don't really hate rules. In fact, I am someone that is usually in favor of them. Call me old-fashioned, but I like there is a rule that loud parties need to stop at 11 p.m. or that you can't pile trash in your yard. Rules like that make total sense to me, but it is when you start to try and use the rules as a way to get more money is where I draw the line. If a party ends 1 minute after 11, should they really get fined? Are a couple items that fell from your trash bin really considered worthy of getting in trouble? Personally, I don't think so, and my story falls along the lines of this. The reason that the group is more known as the grass Gestapo is because the most common type of violation that they will get people on is the length of your lawn. Again, I agree that something being crazy overgrown shouldn't be allowed, but that isn't at all what they do. They go around with measuring tape and note exactly how long the grass is and if they can find someone for it. I know it sounds like the craziest thing ever, and one of the only reasons I still live here is because moving can get really expensive and wasn't worth it. Only once did I have an encounter with these people, and by the rules they were only allowed to give me a warning and a day to fix the violation. Then a personal tragedy hit, and my mom got sick. I went to her house to spend her last moments with her and take care of things. I was a mess and honestly nothing else in my mind mattered, so when I got home I really didn't expect what I saw. I was gone for a couple of months in total, and technically I did hire somebody to take care of my lawn and house. He ended up quitting suddenly and left me that notice in my mailbox, so I had no idea. My grass was longer than even I would have wanted it, but it wasn't crazy tall. My mailbox was overflowing with letters from the HOA fining me and the exact measurements of my grass. The fine started when it was only 1/4 of an inch tall and came daily after that. After looking through it all, I found the most recent letter that told me I owed a total of $30,000 in fines and I had a week to get it to them. I couldn't believe this on top of everything else, and I almost just fully fell apart. I am a pretty average person, and as such I don't have that kind of money just lying around for a rainy day. I wanted to get this fixed and thought that maybe I could just talk to the HOA and explain the situation. It wasn't like I did this on purpose or anything, and I could mow it myself in a day no problem. They didn't want to listen to anything I had to say, and once I told them I didn't have that kind of money, they got extremely nasty. They told me that if they didn't get the money one way, they would do it another way and foreclose my house to get it. I really had no clue what to do, so I just hired a lawyer who told me that I needed to present my case to the judge who would decide from there. I lost my mother, and I didn't want to lose a place to live after all of that. He was confident that I had a strong case though, and after a long wait and getting constantly told I was going to lose my house, I got my day in court. I told the judge everything, even the stuff that didn't matter, like why I was gone for 2 months. Most importantly, I brought the letter of resignation that the guy who was supposed to mow my lawn left me, which was dated. The HOA obviously said that it didn't matter because the lawn was too long, and I had to pay the daily fines for it no matter what. That was when I learned though that the rules of the HOA have certain loopholes and contingencies that don't usually apply when something gets to this point. I wasn't a lawyer and didn't understand all of it, but I will explain it the best I can. There was writing in the bylaws about things like intent and negligence. Basically, if someone grew their grass out on purpose or even if they knowingly neglected it, they could be in this situation. I did everything I was supposed to though and had proof that I didn't knowingly neglect it because I did hire that guy. Despite the fact I couldn't argue that my grass height didn't go against the HOA rules of how tall it can be, I still had a way out of it. The judge agreed that there was no way of me knowing it was being neglected, and I made what was called a reasonable effort to follow the HOA rules. In the end, the fines went away, and the HOA was not allowed to foreclose on my house in order to get that money. It was not only a good outcome for me, but also an unexpectedly good one for other people. I made sure to share this loophole, which basically stopped the grass Gestapo from getting to fine people for these tiny things. They would argue that it didn't fall under intent or neglect, so they wouldn't be paying the fine for it. The HOA was so angry at me for this, and I really only had one thing to say to them. They should have listened to me in the first place instead of trying to fight me, because now they lost everything. I know that I could have tried getting them shut down for misuse of HOA funds or something, but I just wanted to be left alone to mourn. My theory is without the extra income from the fines they won't last long anyway. The next story is titled, "Constantly Rut and Tear Up Our Yard? Have Fun with Your Flat Tires and a Fine." This isn't my story directly, but I was the roommate of the person who did this. TLDR. Abusive dick continuously ruts my friend's yard, so he booby-trapped the yard, popping 2 of his tires and get him fined with destruction of private property as well another fine for illegally modifying his truck. Back when I was in my early 20s, I was rooming my friend whose uncle was allowing us to live in his vacation home that he rarely used anymore. I didn't have to pay rent but had to buy things like toilet paper and paper towels and the like, which was nice. About 4 months pass of living at the house when the house for sale about a block over got sold and the new owners moved in. While I never knew the owners personally, I heard they were in their early 30s and the male in the relationship was an abusive dick. He regularly drove a giant Chevy truck with some of the biggest tires I've seen. I don't know the exact price, but they seemed like they were about a few hundred a piece, maybe $250 per. Now I can't remember what exactly happened, but I know about a week after those people moved in, my friend, who we'll call MF, complained to the new neighbor, who we'll call AD, about something rather small. This enraged AD and he started yelling at MF, and things soon got pretty heated and they left things off, basically saying "foo" to each other. A few days after this, one morning while retrieving the empty garbage bins, I noticed 2 rather large ruts in our front yard. I thought nothing of it other than some drunken idiot went off the road, probably taking the turn too early. After all, we were on the corner of the street. I told MF and we got some shovels, patted down the soil flat and put some grass seed over it. We thought that was that, but wouldn't you know it, it happened again about a week later. This time MF thought it wasn't an accident and thought AD was doing it to be a dick. He drove over to AD's house, and wouldn't you know it, his oversized illegal tires were covered with dirt. So MF goes up to his door and rings the doorbell. AD answers and MF politely says something along the lines of, "Listen, I think we got off on the wrong foot. I'm sorry, but can you please not rut my yard anymore?" To which AD says, "Yeah, whatever man," and slams the door in his face. Not knowing what else he could do, he just told me if he does it again, we'll call the cops. And as you can probably guess, AD does it again. We call the cops, but they say they can't prove it was him. Suggested we get some cameras so if it happens again we can have proof, and left. So we go to the nearest hardware store and pick up some cameras. Now, being rather poor at the time, we couldn't really get high-end quality cameras, but they were cameras nonetheless. There was 8 of them and in half a day we got them installed and set up, all of them watching the street. About 2 or 3 days later 2 ruts appear. We check the cameras and sure enough it was AD's truck. We call the cops and they take a look at the feed. But apparently the quality of the footage was too low and we didn't see the driver or the plates, when in reality I'm pretty sure the cops were just lazy and didn't want to deal with the paperwork. Fed up and rather pissed off but not discouraged, MF wanted revenge, and since he couldn't do it legally he had to take action himself. Originally he thought about putting those spikes things cops use to stop car chases in our yard, but he was scared that was illegal, which I'm pretty sure it is. Instead he didn't cut the grass for weeks, letting it get super long. It was rutted a few times in this time span. But now he was ready to take action. Him being a fairly crafty person put together some homemade sprinklers. He made it so when the top portion that dispensed the water had pressure put on it, it would give reveling a sharp metal spike, but until then wouldn't have any sharp parts exposed to avoid any possible legal repercussions. They looked like crap and were basically a couple pieces of metal spot welded together. I don't even think they worked. Hidden by the grass he put them out and the trap was set. He missed them the first time, but the second time he hit them, flattening 2 of his tires. Finally, after having our yard rutted probably 10 times, we finally got our revenge. He came to our door pissed and probably ready to knock out MF. He was demanding we pay for his tires. We called the cops and they show up and were practically laughing in his face that he wanted us to pay. Instead he got slapped with a fine for destruction of private property, and on top of that they charged him another fine because his tires were offset too far and the mudflats were covering them enough or something like that. It didn't stop him from being a dick, but at least our yard was never rutted after that. The last story is titled, "Get Your Shit Off My Property." In advance. This is not my personal story but rather that of my friend and his neighbor. Retold with his kind permission. I will write this in first person as my friend to avoid confusion. I am also not very technically minded when it comes to electrics, so please bear with me and I shall explain as best as my layman's knowledge allows. Begins. So I live not far from Mila in North Queensland, up in the mountains and rainforest. On my property I am blessed with a strong mountain stream that never goes dry and was perfect for a small hydroelectric setup to produce power for my house. Now to place it on my property I would only get a small head of water, meaning the hydro system would not be running at full capacity and produce a lot less power that it was actually capable of. To ensure I never was left dry, I instead installed 2 hydro systems, which essentially meant I could now run everything as much as I liked. To burn off excess power produced I mounted a row of heating elements, from old hot water systems, on the roof of my shed. I could not feed the excess back into the grid as apparently it is illegal to do this from hydro for some reason, but is apparently perfectly alright from solar panels? A pretty nice setup once complete, and apart from a very small amount of maintenance I never paid a cent for power ever again. I was on very good terms with my downhill neighbor and eventually we struck a deal to place the generators on my neighbor's property where there would be a higher head from my weir and the turbines would run at full power, easily providing enough electricity for both houses. So we poured a new cement slab for the generators and ran a new feed pipe from my weir to the new generator site. Wired everything in and hey presto, free power all round. Everything was good for nearly a decade until my neighbor finally sold the place and moved south to be with his kids. At first the new neighbor seemed okay. He had been told about the power sharing arrangement but apparently had not grasped the bit about the generators being on his property. They were down by the creek and in the forest, so it may not have been immediately obvious where they were located. Unfortunately, when he did discover them he appeared to take it as a personal affront and came storming to my door one night. Why are there 2 bloody great machines on my place with a pipe coming from your place? Me. Do you mean my hydro turbines? Is that what they are? Why are they on my property? I don't want them there. You need to get rid of them or I will. Me. Wait a minute, those turbines are where our power comes from. We can't just rip them out. That is not my problem. I don't want your shit on my land. You have 1 week to move them or else. The discussion went on some more as I tried to get him to understand why they were there and what they did, as well as the original deal to share power because of where they were. He was either too stupid or too rude to care, so I finally agreed to move them the next day. So the next morning I shut off the drive pipe, disconnected the turbines and loaded it all onto my ute. I then went to the original site on my property and reconnected the whole mess. Of course I had to use the original wiring setup to connect them, which only supplied my house. In any case there was now only enough power for one place anyway due to the lower head supplying less pressure. All good, and my place had power again by the evening. My neighbor came home after work to a dark house and defrosting freezers, and went mental. Where the hell is my power? I am supposed to get free power on my place. You can't do this. Me. As I repeatedly explained yesterday, the deal was you get power in return for me being able to site the generators on your property. Now that you forced me to move them, you get nothing. In any case they now can only supply enough power for one house because of their location, so I guess you are going to have to sort out something for yourself. Neighbor stormed off to buy a petrol generator. In the coming week he had an electrician in to do a quote to supply mains power to his house. Wasn't happy with that as the house had been off-grid for a decade and would need extensive modifications to get back on grid. They would need to put a new pole in on his property at his expense as well as a new fuse box, around $15,000. He then got a quote for his own hydroelectric turbine but discovered he did not have sufficient head on his property. The salesman suggested he talk to his uphill neighbor, me, to see if he could run a pickup pipe from that property. Guess who came to my door, cap in hand and very apologetic, to ask if I would mind putting the generators back on his place so he could have power. When I told him there was no way in hell I was going to do that, he asked if he could have permission to run a drive pipe from my weir instead. Me. Gee, I don't know if I want you shit on my land. I eventually let him do it, although I did make him sweat a bit first. However, there was a condition attached. If he ever made trouble with me again, that drive pipe was going to come out immediately. Haven't had so much as a peep from him since. Thank you for listening.